Hi, welcome back to another episode of Just Gay Stuff Podcast. My name is Lauren.
And I am Jess.
And I love getting to be in the pod room with you because, you know, with me having a full-time job and you having a full-time job.
This is the only time we get to spend
This
together.
is our quality time.
And sometimes we spend it with a third.
Ooh. I wasn't...
And I have a job.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
Should I not have jumped in there?
I mean, you can.
You can always jump in. We're always willing to have you.
We do have another fabulous guest this week.
We do.
As you guys have just heard voices.
Yes, a voice from beyond.
A voice from beyond. And before we introduce them, I was just going to say how I love how everyone says to us, you come across super professional, but we're usually quite delirious.
We literally just talked about this in the intro.
We did. Well, today on the show, we're thrilled to welcome the very talented, incredible author Norman Fox. He is an Australian author whose evocative writing brings Sydney's queer scene of the 1980s and 1990s to life. His critically acclaimed Queer as Fox series is a raw, nostalgic and deeply personal exploration of themes like coming out, addiction, mental health and the electric pulse of Sydney's nightlife. So please welcome Norman to the pod.
Welcome Norman Fox to the podcast.
Hi, Lauren and Justin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure having a guest. We're so excited to be able to speak to you tonight. So you've written a couple of books and that's why you're here.
Yeah, and I have thoroughly enjoyed them. I haven't gotten to the second book yet, but the first one I am really enjoying.
Only just come out. Only just
So
come
she's
out.
got time.
Well, he sent it to us, but I just haven't gotten to read it yet.
Let's focus on the first book for a second. So book one in your series is called Ecstasy, and it's a bit of an overview of your life and your experience. So in your own words, can you tell us what it was like putting your life on the page for other people to read?
I think it was therapy initially, and it's actually called Finding Ecstasy, the true story of a teenage closet case.
Oh.
But it began life as I was trapped at holidays in Toowoomba with my family, and I was 16 years old going through a lot of issues, being in the closet and going to dance parties, pretending to be straight for my school friends, leading a double life on the side. And there was a lot going on. And I just one night was listening to Nina Cherry's Raw Like Sushi tape over and over. And I was just writing and writing. And before I knew it, I had a novel.
Wow.
You were living as the original Hannah Montana. You were one person to everyone at school and then a completely different person.
Totally.
Wow. And so in your book, what was it like emotionally to put all that on the page?
It felt good because, I mean, this is a time before social media, before you could find a community, before you could reach out and trust a source or a group of people that were like-minded. And I was so deeply in the closet back in the 80s, I thought I would never come out. I thought I'd get married and live this kind of lie till the day I died. You know, like it was really that kind of pressure growing up during the AIDS crisis in Sydney, Australia.
It's a harrowing story too, and I know that we know a few people who have lived that life because they thought there was no other path, there was no other direction because they didn't see it, and there was no representation, and you did feel stuck. So
Yeah, if you want to give us and our audience a little bit of a teaser about what the second book is about, please plug that away.
The series of books are called Queer as Fox. Obviously, I'm a very queer fox, and they roll on. So I needed an overarching brand for these series of books. There's two more in the works about different stages of my gay life and coming out and beyond. So the second novel is really about club kids in the 90s, and it's called Bad Boyfriend. And it really explores the explosion of the gay scene during the 90s. Oxford Street was the epicenter of a lot of action, and it was at a time before there were mobile phones, and things, I would say, were a little wilder.
Oh, wow. Because they weren't able to be caught on camera.
Potentially, yeah.
yeah, wow.
Well, you just mentioned that, you're a queer fox, and I guess Queer as Fox is such a clever series title. So was that just specifically a play on your name, like a play on words, or was there a different meaning to it?
No, it was just a play on a familiar, a nod to a very, very amazing queer series, and just combined with my surname.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so Queer as Folk was the series?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
I love the London one first, and yes, it's just And it's also a sign of progress that we are seeing more of our stories being told versus, back in the 80s, my only reference to a gay character was on Dynasty, where the son of the tycoon happened to be gay. I felt like I was sane, and they didn't portray him in a negative way. He was just happened to be gay and hugged men that he was interested in. And I found that very interesting.
Yeah, wow. And so we're talking about your first book and your second book right now. And do you have a third in the works?
Yes, it's almost complete.
Okay, awesome.
Ooh.
Well, let's talk about the first two. So we know that they're about your life specifically. How autobiographical are they, and where does Nathan end and Norman begin?
Well, other characters are sometimes three people combined, but
Wow.
Nathan and Norman are essentially one.
Okay. And so these other characters that you've combined, are they to kind of hide other people that were true in your life so that they don't know that they're that character?
Yes and no, to protect the satisfied and to protect the guilty, and just make sure that people are portrayed in a positive way for who they are. In the second book, there is a feature of Ian Roberts at a dance party, and I reached out to him on Facebook and said, would you mind? This is the book I'm writing, this is the context, and he was very supportive. So that's about the only person whose real name has been used.
Wow. That's good to get that green light though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about consent these days, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Otherwise, you have a defamation case or something that you don't want coming.
Totally.
So the stories do talk about your life in the 80s and 90s, coming out as a queer person. What was your coming out story for those who haven't read your first book?
Okay, and it's spoiler alerts for the second book.
Oh, okay.
But I went to university in Lismore initially after high school. I just had done the Sydney scene to death and wanted something different. So I moved up to the University of New England, Northern Rivers, and I met a couple of gay guys there and started going to tropical fruits parties. So I got to experience the queer country regional scene, and they convinced me that all mothers know, like they knew I was gay.
Yeah.
And I did have an affair with one of them. And
Was that after they knew that you were gay, or was that before? Because that would have been a dead giveaway, I'm just saying.
it was actually part of my coming out.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so basically I came out and, we got busy. But anyway.
Experience is part of the journey.
Yeah.
So they convinced me that all mothers know. And unfortunately, my parents, or fortunately, my parents were so progressive. Mum was just like, oh my God, you could give us AIDS. And I was like, well, this is not going how I thought it would go. And I just sort of said to her, look, I'm not going to sleep with you. I'm not going to share needles with you. So I don't know how that's possible. And she was like, you're never to tell your father. And eventually she outed me because I was spending so much time in Surrey Hills with my boyfriend. And when I faced my dad, he was like, oh, I always knew you were gay when you liked Boy George and Culture Club.
That was a dead giveaway, Norman. Come on.
Yeah, so I didn't pick up the signals, but Dad did.
Wow.
Wow, so your experience was, you thought it was going to be quite a positive one coming out to your parents, and then you were kind of blindsided by your mum.
Yeah. To give some context, she was a country girl from Queensland dairy farm, very religious background. So she was more, I think, frightened of what the relatives would think.
Right.
I think it's also hard. We've often spoken about in the podcast, and especially, back then, there was a lack of education as well. So, of course, she didn't know.
Well, like we're talking about, representation wasn't there.
Yeah.
You didn't know people like you. You thought you were the only homo in the world, and that was how it was. And so if you're feeling like the only homo in the world, your parents don't know other gay people.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless they were out in those scenes where gay people thought that they were safe, And back then, where was it safe if you weren't in a scene with every other queer?
Yeah.
Like, there was nowhere.
There was Oxford Street, but that was a very small world to live in. And most people who lived in the suburbs wouldn't go there. So, my parents just didn't associate with the sort of people that I associated with when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's the same now. Like, I look back to my coming out story and my friendships that I had in my friendship circle, and 90% of us are queer.
Yeah.
And it's just like you find your people and you find your tribe, whether you know it or you don't. And then, of course, like my mum specifically formed these ideas around, oh, well, my daughter is queer and she has all these queer friends and I know all these queer people and everything is fine. But not everybody's life is like that. They don't have those people in in their lives to relate to.
And I think that's why what we do and what Norman does, what he does to, you know, open the world to show this is what queer life has been like and we're all here and we're fine and we're chilling and that's what's up.
Did you put your whole coming out story into your books?
The first book, Finding Ecstasy, is more of a tease. The way I come out is more of a twist at the end of the story. I don't know what you guys think, but the second novel details it in brutal reality.
Okay.
With realism, yeah.
Well, we spoke a little bit about you liking Boy George and your dad
and Culture Club
and your dad kind of knowing that you were queer. But looking back now, were there any other early signs or moments from your childhood that you were like, oh, right, like the light bulb moments?
My parents should have picked up on. First of all, my love of ABBA was obsessive. Then my love of Olivia Newton-John was obsessive. Then my love of Madonna was obsessive.
Yeah.
There were clear signs. And then
you were just really, really into that music.
Yeah, music. And then I saw Chris Isaak first video for his single Dancing, and I was 13 at the time, and I just could not understand why I was so attracted to the images I was seeing, and I was in love, and he was my awakening.
Wow. Let's go back to the music for a little moment, though. We had this conversation with someone else that we just recently interviewed, but I really want to get your take on it. What is it about artists like ABBA and Madonna, and even as far as Kylie Minogue, why are they such gay icons for especially gay men?
Yeah.
What is the thing?
They're each for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, Madonna, obviously, for her strength and her music's awesome anyway. But for starters, music has to be awesome. They have to be fabulous.
Yeah.
Ticking these boxes. Then her activism, doing In Bed with Madonna, showing her male dancers kissing. Like, I remember being in the cinema watching that, and when the two men kissed, there were actually groans from girls in the cinema going, ew, yuck. Like, that was the first time they were exposed to that sort of image. And, we were applauding at the back of the audience, so Madonna for so many reasons. ABBA just because they're good.
Wow.
Grace Jones because she's fabulous. Eurythmics because they're fabulous. And they pave the way for people like Lady Gaga and
that's true.
Totally.
all the icons that are just allies to our community. And that has such a huge effect on today's youth, I think.
Yeah, it's the ripple effect of seeing somebody allowing someone else to be their true selves that kind of gives you that oomph to be like, wow, this person is a person that I need in my life, and so I'm going to love and adore them the way that they clearly would love and adore me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like Lady Gaga, actively in today's climate saying, trans people, we see you, it's just so
super
powerful.
important.
Having these allies. And then they're just damn good entertainers. So what more could you want?
Yeah, we
That's
need
true.
those voices as musicians and in activism. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, with a coming out story and even through your books, we've all experienced homophobia to some degree. Has there been any key moments in your childhood or your adulthood that you can look back and remember that you're willing to share with us?
Yes, there's one in the third book which is hysterical, which involves my grandma, but I'll keep that a secret till I release the third book.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's imprinted on me forever.
All right.
It's okay. My gran voted no to the plebiscite, so...
I guess there's a couple of moments. When I was in high school, my mother had, in primary school, sent me to elocution lessons. So I sounded like a member of the royal family. And I ended up going to Dover Heights, which was like a Bondi, kind of bit of a rough school. And the first day of year 7, roll call, the teacher said my name and I answered, here. And the whole class cracked up laughing. And I heard poof da, poof da, poof da. And it was like, okay, that's the first experience, like, your skin's searing. You are singled out. You've been marked. You've been branded.
Because of an accent, though. Like, what?
It's just pronunciation.
Oh, my God.
So that was quite full on. And just bullying in high school. But interestingly, recently when we saw Kylie Minogue in Las Vegas, my husband, Steve, and I took a photo outside the airport at the Las Vegas sign. And just because we're taking a photo, some random American person just walked by and went, this. And I just turned and said, oh, wow, that's so quaint. I haven't been called that since I was a child.
Yeah. Oh, my God. People are so brazen with being so bigoted.
It's terrible.
Depends where you are.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
important to tell those stories too, because we have a lot of listeners that aren't in the queer umbrella. And so I think it's important for them to understand these little things that are quite big things for us, little things for them, that are turning points in our childhood, adolescence, going through puberty. So for that purpose, before your classroom called you a poofter, how did that feel versus the moment that happened and how you had to carry yourself past that?
Well, as a child at primary school, I was very popular because I was the flamboyant, funny kid. And then suddenly I wasn't. And
Yeah.
I was shunned by the boys. It was quite obvious that I couldn't catch a football to save my life. So I was always the last boy to be picked on the team. I got along really well with the girls and was into everything the girls were into. And I think the boys actually were quite jealous that I could talk to all the really, really pretty girls,
Yeah.
with so much confidence. And, we just connected. And I think there's a level of jealousy amongst boys that bully other boys who are queer because of those relationship dynamics.
We also find it's always that insecurity of your own sexuality that comes out to putting someone else and their sexuality down, regardless if you knew at the time or they knew at the time that you were actually gay. It's that, like you said, confidence in yourself and your being that they are threatened by.
Yeah. And it was a ridiculous game to be playing as well. I mean, I knew around 13, high school age, that I was most likely gay. The boys knew it, but I was strenuously denying it. So it wastes so much energy. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have come out so much sooner because, as it turned out, my really close group of friends all knew.
Yeah.
It was no surprise when I came out. In fact, for my girlfriend, it was just like, oh my God, it all makes sense. Thank God you're gay,
Yeah.
because we never did anything.
Yeah, that's so true. I think we know our friends a lot more than we think we do. And they know us more than maybe we care to admit they do.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes I feel like when people come out to you and they say, oh, I always knew, sometimes it's like, oh, did you? Like, why are you thinking about it when you sleep? And I'm like, I'm just trying to come and do my own journey.
I think it's just hard because, society is always stacked against us, unfortunately. So, of course, you're going to have those thoughts and deny it. As Norman was just telling that story, I had a very similar story and I've spoken about it on the podcast before where I think probably similar age, 12 or 13, I was with a group of girls who were my friends and suddenly this new girl joined the group and suddenly I was called a lesbian and I was shunned. And
now they're all lesbians.
Most of them are lesbians.
Yeah, see? Projecting.
Yeah.
What did we say? This actually feeds well into the next question when Norman was talking about his friends essentially supporting him from day dot and he should have just come out earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, finding community in the early years when it was the 80s and 90s. Like it must have been so much harder.
Yeah.
So it must have
what
been
was
so
that
much
like?
harder.
Well, my story, which is I should plug it.
Yeah, plug it. Show it. It's such a good book. I felt like I was really placed right there.
Thank you. Well, my girlfriend was, a tomboy. She was really cool. She was the most popular girl in school. I gravitated to the most popular girl. And she took me to gay clubs to be cool. So my introduction to the community was through my girlfriend on the dance floor and her whispering to me, oh, they're all looking at you, but I just keep looking back at them going, ha ha, he's mine. And I'm looking at the other guys going, wow, you're nice. And I began a double life. I would drop my girlfriend home and then I'd race back to the Exchange Hotel, which was a bar that was very packed in the 80s. And I would make out with guys at a very young age. Now, if I could have had relationships in the school playground with guys my own age, that would never have happened.
Yeah.
What I was doing was really
risky. Yeah.
Crazy. But the desire to explore my sexuality was so strong at that age that I took those risks. And thank God nothing happened to me. But that's what the story is about.
Well, like you said, you didn't feel safe or have a opportunity or a place to be comfortable to explore your sexuality at high school during the 80s. So, of course, you unfortunately had to do risky things.
And then the funny thing was, then dance parties started happening and booming in Sydney around the Hordern Pavilion. There were like mini Mardi Gras every Saturday night. And the crowd was insanely queer with a sprinkling of school kids around our age, 16, 17 years old. And it became kind of cool to go to these gay parties and it was different schools. You'd see different kids from different private schools, public schools, Catholic schools and
It's usually the Catholic schools.
Yeah. Did you then have to have like queer code? Like you've seen these people from the other school and it was like, you know that we can't talk about this in the school ground?
no, it was very much like we were bragging about it. We were just like, we're doing this. And people were like, how do you go there? Aren't you meant to be over 18? And it was like, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that was my next
it
question.
became a badge of honor. And then suddenly all the kids who were calling me faggot and poofta in year 7 by 1990 were like bragging that they were going to gay parties. So I know. It's a wacky, weird world that we live in.
Talking about that, getting into these clubs when you're underage, was that difficult to do? Or was it because, I guess, you found your scene and you found your community, you were like, oh, I have an in?
No, I think it was because back in that time, things weren't as regulated and sophisticated as it is now. Like, I'm not endorsing people of that age group do the things that we do.
And if people read his book, they'd know the age group because I know
so
what the
read
age
Norman's
group is.
book, everyone.
Yeah, the books are very much how not to guides. They're not endorsing a lifestyle. They're actually just reflecting and telling it as it was.
Yeah.
And I think through history we learn, and it captures a certain time where things were quite crazy. Like there's a thing about Gen X kids that, you know, we straight up raised ourselves. You know, it was a very different generation to the ones that followed.
Yeah, like I'm 34 and still living at home. Like that didn't happen back then.
Yeah, I mean, the world we live in is quite amazing in terms of it's better, and it's also, there's some things that, you know, we've lost along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
No, we can understand
there's
that.
pros and cons to everything. It's like
Yeah.
the internet, like everyone is so available to you and there is so much information readily available and that's great. But then we see all these terrible things because they can reach you within a minute. Like,
My bullying did just last during the schoolyard hours. It didn't go on into the evening.
Yeah, because the internet wasn't a huge thing. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my book, I do think it would be good for young people to read because it shows that you can overcome and people do know, and it is okay to be yourself. I mean, that's the key message at the end of the day, to be your authentic self. Because I wasted so much time pretending I was straight and it was all for nothing.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Well, we spoke a little bit about representation and what that looked like for you, and you mentioned Dynasty. Was there anything else that really stood out to you that you thought, oh, wow, I'm finally seeing myself in a space, even if it's now watching something on television or...
I think it was more in the 90s that the world started to shift, and with Ian Roberts coming out, like that was something that you just would not have dreamed could happen. And Mardi Gras became televised commercially, and things started to shift in Australia for the better, I think, for our community. You know, progress is always, you know, a bit one step forward, 2 steps back. But
Yeah, unfortunately.
I think there was more representation of gay people in movies. And like today, I think we're living in a golden age with, you know, stories like Heartstopper, which are just so pure and inspiring. I really feel that today we have some amazing representation. Matt Bomer's Fellow Travellers, for example, tells a time that was much worse, the McCarthy era, and it goes right through to the AIDS era. If you haven't seen it, I do a plug for that. That's amazing. Shannon Malloy, who you had on your podcast, what an incredible book he wrote about Queensland and being bullied. As I read it, I just felt, it's so sad that it still happens, you know, like, and that's why it needs to be continually told, and people need to understand, well, what does that do to a person in terms of their mental health, and for some people, addiction and, you know, negative behaviors. So I think it's important that we keep telling the stories and they get more refined. The thing I will say is that the stories are becoming more and more positive as we go along, which is really good to see.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that stands out to me when I think about the representation I saw. It was like, it wasn't when did I see the first queer person? It was when did I see the first queer person positively portrayed?
Yeah.
And that is the difference. That's the turning point for me. That's the click. That's like, oh, now we're starting to get somewhere.
When was it for you?
I feel like it wasn't until I was a teenager. I think the L Word, which is, you know, the lesbian queer as folk, I think that was the first time. And look, looking back at that series now as an adult, a lot of those characters were toxic as. But as an adult, we can notice that. But as a teenager, what you're seeing is
healthy
couples
lesbian relationships
living their lives in a space where 90% of the time they aren't being shoved down by society.
Yeah.
Yes, there are bits of it because obviously they're portraying real life and what it was like in real life. But the fact you could see a healthy relationship of two women being married in LA and know that those places and those worlds existed, and if I wanted to exist in that world, I could go and do that. That was a turning point for me.
And I feel like the shows like The L Word, another show that I adored by Andrew Haigh, Looking, which should have got more seasons. It was so fantastic. Did just positively and intelligently show queer couples and the world that we inhabit and just our life stories. And it's a beautiful thing.
I think it was also seeing queer couples in the space that you would see straight couples. They're going through the same cycles. They're going through the same hurdles. You know, there's loss, there's sadness, there's happiness, there's triumph. There's all these things that we've seen from heterosexual representation that has been shoved down our throats for so long that we're finally...
And it didn't make us straight.
No, and it didn't make us straight. Let's put that out there. But to see that in a queer space was so enlightening and so uplifting because you just felt seen. And we all know what that feels like, to just finally feel seen.
Yeah, you just want to feel seen,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we mentioned the Sydney nightlife, and of course that's a lot of what the first book really centres around as well. So what role did Sydney's queer nightlife and venues play in shaping your identity?
Probably it's more pronounced in the second book, which I should hold up.
Yeah, plug it. Plug the second book.
Boyfriend,
Very nice.
a 90s club kids true story.
Actually love the cover. I
Yeah,
love the
it's
neon
good.
vibe.
Yeah, it's very 90s.
It's sitting in our
Yes,
on our
it's
thing.
it's in our bedroom actually.
Yeah.
Aren't we lucky, everyone?
Advanced copies.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I transferred to UTS. So I studied at Sydney after my first year of university in the country because I fell in love. And I was desperately wanting to have a boyfriend. And it talks about the gay scene on Oxford Street, how you would start at the Albury Hotel and watch a drag show, watch the Kylie show, and then you'd migrate up to Gilligan's or the Oxford Hotel. There were so many venues that were completely packed with all different kinds of parts of the gay community, down to the Midnight Shift or DCM. There were these great dance clubs. And then everyone ended up at the Taxi Club. And that was an interesting place. And the Flinders Hotel. There were just so many venues that you could bounce around between.
Wow.
And
it actually sounds amazing.
totally was. And the vibe was very friendly. There was no mobile phones, so people had to actually interact. And it was quite a wild scene. And then you had the horde and dance parties going on as well. So, and also at Alexandria Stadium, we had sweat parties. And in the new book, Bad Boyfriend, we talk about how we went raising money for Bobby Goldsmith Foundation on Shop Yourself Stupid. And Belinda Carlisle played the after party.
Wow.
And she was amazing. And she brought everyone to tears with Summer Rain. And they were just beautiful times.
Wow. It sounds like, you know, for a time where we're talking about finding community is harder than now and not much representation, it sure sounds like a fucking amazing time.
That's the way I describe it.
There's a lot of clubs, though, that were, you know, allowing, well, I say allowing, but it was kind of like that back in the day, I suppose. But to have a queer space, there was a lot of places in Sydney that had queer space. I'm just comparing it to what I know of Brisbane,
now,
which is where we are.
Very limited.
I think there are only still 4 venues I know of that still run queer parties, and only 2 of them are queer dedicated.
And I think only recently another queer place has shut down in Brisbane.
Sporties.
Sporties, yeah.
But, I was counting Sporties. So, Sydney is a lot bigger than Brisbane. But just on the comparison, I'm like, wow, we are still in 2025 very limited here in Brisbane.
I think also Sydney is very limited compared to what I just described. I think it has a function of the, social apps and Grindr. People meet in different ways now for reasons they may have gone out in the past. But for partying, I feel like we may have lost something. It's more about music festivals today. So absolute mass events that everyone is there, and it's a mix of everybody. So, by the way, I've never been to a music festival.
Neither.
You guys, you're missing out. Well, it depends what you're looking for. Depends what you're looking for.
Just would you say everyone's at the music festival? It's just like, what's the community like? Or does it depend on the artist?
Oh, yeah, it definitely depends. I mean, I've been to everything from dance festivals, but like I'm not a raver or anything like that. I never got into that scene, but I've been to like dance festivals all the way to like heavy festivals. And it definitely depends on the artist. But, you know, there's those few groups that just go for the sake of going because they love that kind of atmosphere and that vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's not me. I'm 80 years old on the inside.
You also burn like a tomato. So
Yeah, that too.
it's probably not for you.
It sounds very similar to me. I'm very much like, I did retire from the scene very early in life, or I like to think early.
That's because you started early, Norman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had like a decade of going quite hard, quite young. But when I met my husband, Stephen, at 25 years old,
Wow.
he was a mature age university student and I was in a corporate professional marketing job. I was just ready to settle down and I never looked back.
Aw.
I looked back at a few Mardi Gras after parties where Kylie and Cher performed.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can't miss those.
But they're mandatory. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They would revoke your queer card if you didn't go.
absolutely.
I wanted to touch on something you said before because you went from country parties down to Sydney parties. What's the contrast of that?
Very good question. More room to dance.
Yeah.
The demographic was older because back in the, and it's probably still the same today, a lot of people who were HIV positive migrated to the Northern Rivers. There was an ACON centre up there to live a more positive lifestyle and, you know, extend their lives. So the Tropical Fruits Party was really their celebration of life and living out and proud and coming together as a community. So yeah, that I think made it quite unique and it was really, really fun and really friendly. I think the Sydney scene could be quite pretentious. I remember when, you know, I had finally come out. I actually found it hard initially to make connections with people. You know, I felt like this weird skinny kid who was, you know, just having a bit of a beer and hoping to make eye contact with a guy that I might hook up with. It took a while and it took making gay friends to then get into that scene and then make more friends and evolve.
Yeah.
We've talked previously on the podcast about how the queer scene is also often fueled by alcohol and drugs, and there isn't really that
Safe space
Safe
without
space
It's a
it.
heterosexual scene, though. I think it's not unique to the gay community. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I was just going to say, did you ever feel like when you first entered that scene that you were pressured to be something that you weren't even in a queer space?
No, definitely
that's so
not.
positive.
I think in terms of substance abuse within Australia, it's across the board. It's not, you know, something that's
Unique.
unique to the queer community or the heterosexual community. It's just a factor of life that
Yeah.
needs to be dealt with. And part of my inspiration for writing Finding Ecstasy was because pill testing wasn't available back then, and it really should have been. And governments are still grappling with issues of harm minimization, and it should be so simple. And yet people die at festivals every year, and it's preventable. It's preventable.
Yeah.
And you did speak just now on people who were suffering from AIDS and HIV. So what was it like living in a time and a place that was so intertwined with that? And how did that affect you as a person? Especially with the misguided information and
Yeah.
the
propaganda,
really negative
hysteria.
press. Yeah.
Well, actually, this might surprise you, but we actually had ACON organise people who were going through those experiences to come and do school talks, education series. And, you know, I remember being 14 and people talking about using condoms and, you know, friends that they were losing, what was going on. And, you know, these are the things you need to know. And then as I got older in the clubs, ACON had posters and education messages everywhere about always use a condom. And there were some pretty horrific TV campaigns as well. There were scare campaigns, which possibly demonized the gay community rather than were a positive voice to use a condom.
The Grim Reaper campaign springs to mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
the twirling baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, having those campaigns made people more aware. So I feel like if I had been younger, I possibly may have been less educated and may have been infected. I grew up in a time when, you know, there was a lot of investment in education and I benefited from that and so did my friends. But yeah, in terms of the partying, I think it was a sense of, I will survive. There was just this, I'm going to live my life.
Yeah.
And, the gay community are such a resilient community and full of such positive people. And that's what you felt on the dance floor. I mean, a lot of people say that the dance party movement really was born out of the HIV crisis because people stopped having sex, but they started dancing more.
Yeah.
So
You had to get it
that
out
theory
somehow.
yeah, so you had to get that nervous energy out
To
somehow.
feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that generated the reason why everyone was turning up every weekend.
Wow, that's so positive. I love that.
I wasn't prepared for
I
a
wasn't
positive
prepared
answer.
for a positive story. That was so good.
No, it was good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I was trying to do some research and it's saying that your first book is being adapted into a film.
Yes.
That's very exciting. Congratulations. So what has that journey been like for you?
How did that happen?
Yeah, I'm really
Rachel,
excited.
we have COVID-19 to thank because
And no one ever said that sentence
no one ever
ever.
says that.
because we were shut in for a certain period of time, having done screen studies at university, decided, okay, I've got this novel, I'm going to just adapt it into a film. And I began writing the film script. And I've shopped it to a couple of independent production companies and got some interest. And I've met a director named James Dubay who worked on the Australian version of The Office and a couple of other really amazing things. Thou Shalt Not Steal, which is a series, The Last Days of the Space Age.
Wow.
And we're collaborating on making the script punch harder because while I can write a novel, film script is a completely different...
Oh, it's a whole different world.
different art form. And we're collaborating to make something magical.
That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Wow. So what's the next step? Get the script finished and then you start pulling in some actors and...
Well, at the moment, you think about who you want to play certain roles and...
Oh.
That's a massive
Now
thing.
I'm like, the question is, who are you going to want to play you? I mean, Nathan.
A complete unknown.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, opportunity for a young actor or young actors, because the story goes from 9 to 18.
Yeah.
So from a casting point of view, it's a great challenge to have this, and for all the characters in the story, because it does tell a story from 9 to 18. So the characters do mature.
Yeah.
So you have like 9-year-old Nathan, 16-year-old Nathan, 18-year-old Nathan.
Wow. That's so good that you get to choose those people.
That's really cool.
Like you could just know someone next door and be like, hey, you're perfect. I know that you do acting. Come and be in my movie.
Yeah.
See, it's all about who you know.
It is.
I could play you, just so you know.
Or maybe you could play one of the members of the group.
I
You could.
could. I've done acting classes. I don't know if I was any good at them, but I've been an extra.
I like to
You
look
could be
behind
the-
the scenes.
You could be the tree.
I'm fully yanking your chain, but also call me.
There's many roles. I mean, that's part of the challenge of the film too, because we're talking large-scale dance parties and
Wow.
bringing that to life.
I'm willing to travel.
requires a lot of
That's
work.
really
Willing to
cool.
Willing to meet you in
She's just
person.
really putting it out there, just so you know.
I'm just imagining my name in the credits, Jess from Just Gay Stuff podcast. What are your hopes for how your story will translate on screen?
Good question. I just hope it translates authentically like real life. It's not cliched. It's warts and all.
I think that's important to see the hairy situations and then see how you get out of them because, even though we are progressed as a society, there are still a lot of hurdles. And so it's good for younger queer kids to see that there's another side.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason why the book has the trigger warning at the beginning of the book and references to Beyond Blue and Black Dog Institute. There are confronting themes about underage sex, underage drug taking. These are not, they're taboo subjects. So it would be a taboo film.
Yeah.
I imagine it's going to be rated R or M.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you said, it delves into really raw and taboo themes. So how do you feel like that will be received, or are you worried about how that will be received?
Or are you just like slap an R on it?
I don't think you can worry about it. It's real life. And if people have a problem with real life, that's their problem. I'm still here. I'm a successful business person. I'm in a loving relationship. I've been married for now 27 years to my husband. Just had some cats and
Beautiful.
We have
kittens.
sausages.
Yeah.
Oh, we have
See,
Maine
the
Coons.
gay guys have pussies and the
we
lesbians have sausages.
Yeah,
It just works.
it does work.
We're not missing anything from our lives, see?
Yeah, and I think it's a story of resilience at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so looking back at the writing journey of Finding Ecstasy and now your second one,
Bad Boyfriend.
Bad Boyfriend, yes. Is there anything that you think you would have written differently, or are you just like, it's raw, it's real, people need to be able to swallow that fact, I guess?
I think I hesitated around a relationship, Nathan's first love. That was a challenging thing to put into a novel, and it's challenging for some people, but it ultimately happened. And I think the reason it happened is because society had certain attitudes to being gay that pressured a child to seek out love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope that doesn't happen today, but presenting a world where it did happen. And depending on attitudes of society, if you have a more homophobic society, these sorts of things happen. So ultimately, the message is to be more tolerant and accept diversity.
Yeah.
And those more vulnerable scenes that you did have to delve into and write, was there any fear of people who knew you reading your book and finding out these things about you?
Definitely the second book, Bad Boyfriend, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
How do you deal with that anxiety?
I just listen to some Madonna.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Queen fixes all.
He answered that like you're silly.
Bit of ABBA.
Yeah, a bit of ABBA. No, that works. Come on a Just Gay Stuff podcast
Bit of
and
Kylie.
blog about your
Bit of
books.
Kylie.
And Miley Cyrus is helping as well, I find, these days as well.
Oh, I love Miley.
Me
Her
too.
latest number, wow. End
Yeah.
of the world.
And you know, I feel like, well, is she bisexual? Did
I
she
think
come out
she's
as bisexual?
bisexual or pansexual. I'm
She's
not
definitely
sure.
under the umbrella.
Yeah, we've seen the Fletcher video. It's okay.
But I feel like we were talking about Hannah Montana before, but she kind of has that thing where it's kind of what Sabrina Carpenter's going through now. People have expected her to stay a child and then they get upset that she's now an adult. Well, no, she's an adult living her life. You have to move with the times. People grow up and people develop, and
They keep them in that Disney capsule. That's why they're just stuck in that Disney capsule, unfortunately.
by the time this comes out, we'll have gotten past the Robert Irwin thing. But I see the same thing happening there. He's 23 years old, everyone. He's not 2.
I know, totally. It's his choice.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Speaking of like all these great queer people and storytelling and your fabulous books, of course, how do you think queer storytelling has changed from like the 90s to now? And what do you think still needs to be evolved?
It's a great question. I think there was less queer writing in the 90s. I think it's a very rich area now that people write about. There's so many queer authors, and through podcasts like what you're doing and audiobooks, you know, we can tell so many more stories are being shared, and we all live in our own echo chambers now. So you can keep seeking out more of what you like because there's so much of it there. So many people like myself trying to get their stories out there.
Yep.
And it's not for everyone, which is fine. One of the greatest things I loved about this experience of being a writer is the feedback I've received from complete strangers telling me how much it reminded them of their childhood and how it brought back fond memories. And one person put a review on my previous or the original edition of Finding Ecstasy, said, "What a great story from an indestructible teenager." And I was just like, oh, I never saw myself as an indestructible teenager, but it was these sorts of things that came, the feedback that you get back from the readers is what makes it worthwhile. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And
Knowing that you're connected. Like, you can put the book out there, but once it's out there, it's up to the reader to make that world come alive and respond to it.
Yeah, and I feel like that as well. You never know who you're reaching unless those people reach out to you. And so feedback is so important. So if you have read Norman's book, anyone who's listening to this right now, reach out to him and tell him what you think, because it's the same as us on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's so lovely when we hear from people who do listen to us. weekly drone on about
Stuff.
shit that you may not care about, but you keep coming back, which is amazing.
We're very grateful for it.
Yes. Well, all of us as creatives are grateful for anyone who's going to appreciate our art, but to see how it touches somebody in a really positive way, like for someone to call you an indestructible teenager and for you to have never thought that about yourself, someone else is like reading your story going, oh my God, the resilience.
The resilience, that's what it was. Yeah.
And for us to not feel that within ourselves, but for other people to see us as that is such an amazing feeling, I feel.
Yeah. And that's what art's all about.
Yeah. And you can look back at your own experience and go, wow, maybe I did do this better than I thought.
Yeah.
Well, we all have stories to tell, and sometimes we think, oh, my story's not amazing. And then you tell it to someone else and they're like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
How do you think that younger Norman would have felt reading your novel? Like, do you think if he had something like that novel,
How
it
young
would
are
have...
we talking?
Well, I guess like within
Probably
the
teenager.
teenager, like the 15, the age group of Nathan is, like, how would you have felt reading?
I think 16-year-old Nathan would have felt really good if he knew that my first podcast was with DJ Maynard.
That's pretty cool.
DJ that played at the Hordern Pavilions and we worshipped. And I still worship. He is such an amazing person, so full of life. And he just brought the dance floor to life with all these 70s classics and all the songs that you weren't meant to dance to because they weren't cool. But, you know, here are all these Paddington, Surrey Hills clubbers just getting down to Blondie and Earth, Wind and Fire, me, ABBA. You know, give me a man after midnight. It was just amazing that I had an opportunity to talk to him about the book, and we walked around the Hordern and just shared stories. And that was a moment when I thought, yeah, young Norman would have that would have blown my mind.
Yeah, wow.
That's amazing. So we've talked about your first couple of books and then you do have a third. You've just said that you...
I think he has 2 more.
Do you have 2 more?
Yes, 2 more. I had to come up with Queer as Fox.
Yeah.
You needed the whole series.
Yeah, because the names of the novels are different. Like there's no connection there, but like overarching is Queer as Fox in terms of the series. So the third book is really a origin story right through to today. And the fourth book is about my husband's story.
Oh, wow.
Do you have titles that you can spoiler or no?
I'm nervous to say it just in case someone steals it.
Okay, yeah, don't.
Don't say it.
Don't say it.
That's fine.
Don't say it.
You can tell us off the recording.
I will. I can't wait to share.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, Norman. It's been such a fabulous interview. But we do have one final question that we're asking all of our guests for 2025. And that question is, do you like being queer?
I love being queer. I can't even think straight.
Pun intended, or?
Totally. I'm very much about queer rights and visibility, and whether it be in the workplace, the schoolyard, globally, politically, I think it's really important that we stand up for young people who may be struggling and for people who may be prejudiced.
Yeah.
It's important that we show up.
I agree. I think while it is difficult at times, we do take on that job to help educate those around us and make the world a safer and better place for the generations to come. And people in our space that might not have the confidence to speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so glad that I had this opportunity to talk to both you and Jess and Lauren. Thank you for doing what you do, because it does give people a voice and it gives people who may be struggling with their identity a place to go, oh, okay, they sound like me.
Yeah, and
thank
likewise,
you. Yeah, I
thank
was
you
gonna
for
say
sharing
same thing.
your experiences with the world so that someone can pick up your book and go, wow, he made it out of this dark tunnel and this really fiery life, and now he's here and he's creating something beautiful.
Thank you.
Before we go, where can people find your book if they would like to read Finding Ecstasy to start with, and then when Bad Boyfriend comes out, where can they find it?
Okay, so they're both available on Amazon and iBooks. The second novel is exclusively at the bookshop Darlinghurst for a month. Ooh. And then if you go to any bookstore and request Finding Ecstasy, they can order it in.
Wow.
That's really exciting.
Wow. So both books are out right now if you want to go and find Finding Ecstasy and Bad Boyfriend by Norman Fox.
And if Norman has a link to his website that he can share with us? We could put that in the show notes.
Yes, we'll put it in the show notes. So we hope you've enjoyed, everybody. We know that we have. We love having a guest and we love learning all about someone else's journey and having that on the podcast to share with you.
I think my favorite thing is, getting to talk to all the guests, and we're all a bunch of creative people essentially that come together to share our voices and share other people's voices as well.
Totally.
And that's what we're all about. But I think that's it from us now.
It is. So until next week.
I guess you better remember to
Stay queer, mofos, from nofo.
Nice. Love
that.
it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm talking about, you're talking about, we're talking about just gay stuff.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just Gay Stuff. Make sure to follow us at Just Gay Stuff Podcast on all your socials and write to us with your stories at justgaystuffpodcast@gmail.com.